optimization. But these days, most search engines don't put too much weight on these keywords, but we can still use them to define the keywords that represent this page. We have another meta element for defining a description for this page. So if you type meta:desk and then press tab or enter, here we can type a description for this page. What we type here will appear on Google or other search engines when someone searches for our website. For example, if we search for Apple, here's what we get. Now look at this text. What you see here comes from this element over here. So this is the purpose of meta elements. With these meta elements, we can give information about a web page. All right, next we're going to talk about the elements you need to know for working with text. All right, now let's talk about the most common elements for working with text. So you learn about the P or paragraph element, which we use for displaying some text. So here I'm going to say, I love to teach you HTML. Now sometimes we want to emphasize a part of our text. Let's say the HTML word here. To do that, we can wrap it inside an M or emphasis element. So here I type M, press tab. Here's the emphasis element. Let's hover over it and see what the tooltip says. It says the M element represents stress emphasis of its content. So whenever we want to emphasize some content, we can wrap it inside the M element. So in this case, I'm going to move HTML inside these tags. Now, let's save the changes. Here's what we get. So by default, browsers display emphasized content in italic. But don't assume that whenever you want to display italic content, you should use the M element. Because the purpose of the M element is to emphasize content in our HTML document. And this helps search engines extract important content in our documents. Anything to do with styling should be done in CSS. For example, here we can change the default style of emphasized elements and remove the italic. Let me show you. So in the head section, we add the style element. And here we define a rule for emphasized content. We can set the color to red and font style to normal. Now don't worry about memorizing any of these CSS properties. We're going to go over them multiple times throughout the course. But let's see what happens now that we apply these styles. So our emphasized content is displayed in red and it's no longer italic. Now in the past we had an element called I, which was short for italic. If we use this element, we get the same result as before. Our content is displayed in italic. But this element is considered deprecated because HTML is not meant for styling. It should only be used for structuring content. So don't use the I element to display content as italic, okay? Now we have a similar element in HTML called strong. Let's hover over it and see what the tooltip says. The strong element represents strong importance, seriousness, or urgency of its contents. Conceptually, it's kind of similar to the emphasis element. So where you should use it really depends on your context, on your content. Now let's save the changes and see what we get. So by default, strong elements are displayed as bold. But once again, we can always change the styling. Now in the past, we had another element called B, which is short for bold. So whenever we wanted to make something bold, we use this element. But once again, this element is considered deprecated because styling should be done in CSS and not in HTML, okay? So don't use B or I elements. Now, I'm going to remove this element and just add HTML. Let me show you a cool trick. Let's say we want to wrap this word with the M element. There is a shortcut for it. So on the top, we go to the View menu. Look at the shortcut for the command palette. On Mac is Shift, Command, and P, and on Windows is probably Shift, Control, and P. So let's select HTML and then bring up the command palette. With this command palette, we can execute commands in VS Code. So here I'm going to search for a command called wrap with abbreviation. That is the first command on the list. Now we press enter, and here we type the element that we want to use to wrap our selected content. In this case, M. Press enter, done. So I didn't have to manually create an M element and then move HTML inside it. It's very handy. So this is all about text